So until the pandemic, I didn't know that I had dimples right here. I knew about these, but not about these. I also didn't notice how thin my skin was getting or how many wrinkles I had around my eyes. Thanks a lot, Zoom. I joked at the beginning of the pandemic with a congregant who's a plastic surgeon that once we were allowed out of the house, there was going to be a stampede to his office. And guess what? There was. Plastic surgery and tweaks such as Botox and fillers are booming. Dermatologists report an increase in procedures and appointments. Dr. Asher Sadiki said many people are telling us they didn't realize their nose was so big or that they had so many wrinkles around the eyes. Cosmetic dentistry is also experiencing what they have called a Zoom boom. And it turns out that Zoom has also been a boon for men's makeup, seeing over a 50% increase in the first few months of COVID alone. All of this staring at the self is apparently having a devastating effect on our self-confidence. While research into the confidence-sucking power of Zoom is still pending, a study published in the Journal for Behavior Research and Therapy found that when people with body dysmorphic disorder looked at themselves, it took about 25 seconds for them to become distressed. But even those of us with healthy body image, it says 10 minutes is all it takes for us to begin pulling ourselves apart, experiencing stress and anxiety. So you can imagine after we spend an hour in a meeting or catching up with friends, we have had ample opportunity to find flaws, imagined or otherwise. We were a nation struggling with self-esteem before the pandemic. It's not hard to see why Zoom has become yet another thing for us to feel anxious about. I hope my lighting's good. You sit on my team? No, okay. So what do we do? How do we safeguard our self-esteem in a world that requires our digital attention? We can turn off our cameras, opting into Zoom's touch-up feature, even cosmetic enhancements. Those might make us feel better about our appearance for the moment, but they are not the stuff of lasting confidence. We all know that appearance is not what is most important. What's really important is on the inside. But what do we do when we can't get past our exterior to do the real work that needs to be done? Not the nose job or the touch-ups, but the soul work, the inner growth. So today I want to share some stories about mirrors that I think will be helpful for us. The first story comes from the Talmud, Ta'anit 20. There is the case of Rabbi Shimeon ben Elazar, who had been studying at his master's home and feeling really good about himself because he'd learned so much good Torah. And he's riding to the next village to share the Torah he's learned on a donkey when he sees a man in front of him who greets him saying, "Peace unto you, my Lord." And the Talmud says, quote, that he responded, "Empty-headed, you are so ugly. Is it possible everyone in your town is as ugly as you are?" The man replied to this great rabbi, "I really couldn't say, but go to the craftsman who made me and tell him, how ugly is this utensil that you have made?" Rabbi Simeon ben Elazar realized he'd sinned. He got off his donkey, fell on the ground, begging for forgiveness. Now, while this story is about a learned rabbi calling someone else ugly, we often do this to ourselves. We use negative self-talk, And when we do so, we too are insulting God's creation. The first thing the Torah teaches about humanity is that we are created in the image of God. So, when we begin to pull ourselves apart, when we negative talk and say we are ugly or empty-headed, we are insulting our Creator, not just for making us, but for making us in God's image. Think of it this way. Have you ever seen an outfit that you initially thought was ugly, and then you went and checked the tag and saw it was Dior, and you thought, this is really interesting. It's unique. I think it's kind of chic. I wonder if they have it in my size. Jewish tradition wants you to know you are Dior and more. Our second mirror story comes from Primo Levi, the great author and Holocaust survivor who wrote a short story called The Mirror Maker. It tells the story of a young man, Timoteo. Timoteo keeps up the family business of creating mirrors, and they are good mirrors, but at night he plays with different kinds of mirrors, and his favorite is something called the meta mirror. Now, the meta mirror is really special because it doesn't just reflect how you look. If you put it on the forehead of someone else, it reflects how that person sees you. So Timoteo takes the mirror and he puts it on the head of a woman that he'd been pursuing for years. And what he saw back was a balding man with drool coming out of his mouth, overweight, and he said, maybe she's not interested in me. Then he took the mirror to his mother and he put it on her forehead, and he saw a reflection of himself at 16 in school. That person in class made that insightful observation or witty joke. You thought, I wonder why I never noticed them before. They're kind of cute. That's why when we fall in love, the other person might even appear to glow when we look at them. We also learn that people are scared to see themselves from others' points of view. We think that others are judging us, pulling us apart, but in reality, most people are too fixated on themselves and pulling themselves apart to worry about others. And we learn that the best way to see ourselves is through the eyes of someone who loves us, especially when we're feeling bad about ourselves. The Mishnah teaches, do not look at the container, but what is in it. That's what those who love us do. That's what God does. They love us for our insides, and that makes our outsides all the more beautiful. That's what the High Holidays is really about, looking at what's on the inside. So, if you're feeling down about your outsides, focus on your inside. Kill it at work. Run a little further yesterday than today. Do something for others. Compliment yourself with a genuine, specific compliment. And tell your friends and family if you need a little pick-me-up. Our insides are what this time is about, and your insides are gorgeous. Another mirror story. Not a Jewish source per se, but sacred to my generation is the 1984 movie, The Never-Ending Story. I see nods, that's good. In The Never-Ending Story, 10-year-old nerdy Bastian is chased by bullies one day on his way to school. He hides in a bookstore where he sees the bookseller reading a book. When Bastian asks about the bookseller says, "This book isn't safe." Well, of course, Bastian then has to have the book. When the bookseller isn't looking, he steals it, he runs to school, and he hides in the school's attic as he begins to read The Never-Ending Story. In it, he reads about a hero, Atreyu, who must go on a quest facing many challenges in order to save the childlike empress from this evil that is destroying their world, making her sick, called the Nothing. One of the biggest challenges Atreyu faces is called the Magic Mirror Gate. As the Noam Endiwuk explains, at the magic mirror gate, Atreyu will have to face his true self. When Atreyu says it's no big deal, Endiwuk says, "Oh, that's what everyone thinks. But kind people find out they are cruel. Brave men discover they are really cowards. Confronted with their true selves, most men run away screaming." When our hero, Atreyu, gets to the mirror, he sees an image of Bastian. Now, Atreyu has no idea who Bastian is, so he kind of shrugs and keeps going. It's a very confusing part of the movie. But Bastian freaks out. He throws the book and he runs. Remember, he began reading this story when he was running from bullies. He sees himself as a wimp, as a nobody, as a loser. And here he is seeing that in reality, he is a hero. He has the potential to save the world. He saw the outside, the scared, wimpy kid, but on the inside, he had heroic potential. This is seeing ourselves from God's point of view. Each of us has a quest, a reason for being, and it has little to do with our appearance. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov taught, it's my favorite quote, "The day you were born is the day God decided the world could no longer exist without you." The Mishnah teaches that each and every human being is obligated to say, "Bishvili nivra ha'olam," for my sake was the world created. We are of infinite worth, and each of us was created for a reason. Our worth and our meaning in life have nothing to do with our exteriors, our shells. They have to do with our interiors, our souls. So we must remember to nourish our souls, our interiors. And the best way to do that is to stop focusing on the exterior. So, a last mirror story. There's an old Jewish story about a man with this gorgeous, fancy mirror. He is a very wealthy man. And he invites people all the time from the neighborhood who are in need to come and dine with him in his house. Now, on one of these occasions, somebody asked him about the mirror because the mirror was gorgeous, but they noticed that the bottom corner of the mirror was damaged. It looked as if the silver behind the mirror had been scraped off. And the man explained. He had been trying to gather things to be successful himself, and he had been successful. He had this beautiful home full of things, this gorgeous mirror, his prized possession, and he invited a rabbi, a very learned rabbi, to see his home to kind of show off. And the rabbi looked around and said, "What is your most prized possession?" And so the man took him to see the mirror. And the rabbi said, "Well, what do you see when you look in the mirror?" And the man said, "I see myself." He said, "What else do you see?" "Oh, I see all of my things." And the rabbi said, "Do you have a window?" And he pulled back the curtain and he looked out the window and he said, "What do you see out the window?" Now, this was a tough time in the world, so he saw people laughing and joking, but he also saw people begging for food, begging for money, a kid being chased by a vendor as he stole from the cart. And the rabbi asked him, "Do you know what the difference is between a mirror and a window?" And the man, in fact, did. He said, "Yes, they're both pieces of glass, but on the back of a mirror there is silver, so that it reflects you." And the rabbi said, "It's interesting how when you look at the silver, you only see yourself. I wonder if it would work the other way. If you took some of the silver away, you'd be able to see as if it were a window." And so he scraped the bottom corner of the mirror so that he would always remember to look outside and share the wealth that he had. We have now spent 18 months focusing on ourselves, staring at ourselves on Zoom. It isn't normal and it isn't healthy, And oddly, this oversaturation of seeing ourselves constantly has led us not to knowing and seeing ourselves clearer, more as who we are, but has resulted in distorted versions of the self. So today I want to suggest the most helpful way to feel good about yourself and your appearance has nothing to do with Botox, makeup, or filters. It has to do with scraping the silver off of our mirrors, and instead of looking at ourselves, focusing on others. When we do for others, we see we have a purpose beyond ourselves. Our world gets bigger. We find that instead of being full of ourselves, we are full of purpose and meaning and gratitude. Ironically, thinking less about the self helps us to feel better about the self. So let's start turning off self-view and look more at what we might be able to do for others. Yes, crush it at work, volunteer, plant a garden, give tzedakah, really listen, bake a meal for a friend who's struggling. When we do for others, we do for our own self-image. We see ourselves as more beautiful on the outside when we feel beautiful on the inside. And if you find you are still down on yourself, remember who created you. Like the mother who saw Timoteo as a golden child, God created you for a purpose. You are different from everyone else. If there'd ever been someone like you before, God wouldn't have needed to create you. God sees all of us, the good, the bad, the things we try to hide from ourselves and others. God sees us raw and unfiltered and says, because of you, I have made this world. May 5782 be a year when we fill our souls by doing for others and allow our inner beauty to radiate light into the world. Shana Tova.